Hello, everybody. um, I decided to jump on today to talk a little bit about two of my ancestors that I find rather fascinating and fix my hair while I'm at it. I am one of those people who finds my ancestors' history endlessly fascinating. And a friend of mine, whom I've actually never met in real life, but I've been following on YouTube for quite a while, Colton Tanner Casados Medve. Am I saying your last name right, Colton? Otherwise known as Wayward Jedi. He's been posting a bunch of stuff about his ancestors. He's been posting stuff about like his immediate family and like his deep ancestry and like a lot of stuff from his like DNA kit. And I was like, oh, that's fun. And I kind of wanted to do the same. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit today. So if this kind of stuff doesn't ring your bell, then don't bother. But the two that I wanted to talk about today are my two native ancestors that I know the most about. I have a third one that I know about on my dad's side of the family from my grandmother, my paternal grandmother's side, the Dickies. But I don't know a lot about that person. I found them on Family Search. Family Search is a really awesome and amazing genealogy service that's run by the LDS Church. And you can, I mean, if you have people in your family lineage, which a lot of us do here in Utah, that are Mormons, it's kind of fascinating just how much stuff you can find. So let me back up a tiny bit. Growing up, I had been told forever and ever by my maternal grandmother, my mom's mom, Betty, that we had a native ancestor. And I was like, yeah, okay. Because pretty pale, it's not showing. But she was like, no, I promise. Like, she was like full-blooded native person. And, you know, I didn't know much more than that. And then COVID happened, and my mom, who got the genealogy bug, went and found her. And it's Adelaide Exervia Brown, who married Captain James Brown's son, James Moorhead Brown. Captain James Brown is the founder of the city of Ogden. He came out here and bought up all this land shortly after the Mexican-American War. He came out as part of the Mormon Battalion, and then his son ended up marrying Adelaide, who is Shoshone. And then her mother's story is really fascinating. So when I found all that, I was like, wow, that's really cool. So the two that I know about on my mother's side of the family were both Shoshone women. And then the one that I found on my dad's side of the family, I think she's Cheyenne, but there's not a whole lot of information about her. She comes from the Dickey side, so she would have been my 5th great grandma, so pretty far back. Her name was Mary Sarah Dickey, after she married one of the Dickies. And so on my dad's side of the family, I have a Cheyenne woman. And then on my mom's side of the family, I have 2 Shoshone people, which is kind of cool. Because I recently, well, not recently, it's been a few years, I went to the commemoration of them turning 2nd Street into Chief Little Soldier Way. And I got a chance to meet Darren Perry, who is the former chairman of the Northwestern Band of Shoshone. And he and I have been pretty friendly ever since. And he's really sweet. He's been really, really gracious about answering all my questions, even though I don't want to be like a pest, but he's pretty cool. So, and it's fascinating to me because I've always had like a really strong pull towards the sort of mythos of the Native American culture. But I also want to be really sensitive to not like romanticizing what Darren was calling the other night the dead Indian, like the people from the past and not like the current people who live and their struggles. So, and it, again, it's kind of fascinating because I've always had this pull, and I remember watching a film called Lakota Woman that was really, really good. And then I discovered that the film that was about, which was all about the American Indian movement when they occupied Wounded Knee in the 70s. She wrote a book. Her name's Mary Crodog. And so I had read Lakota Woman when I was quite young, and I've just been really interested ever since. But anyway, okay, so I'm going to switch. Can I switch? Wait, do I have that option on here? Oh, I don't know if I do. Well, I might just have to, let's see. I don't know if you guys can see that or not. I swear there's got to be an option to switch. How do I switch? Oh, that's disappointing. Well, let's see. Let me come over here so we can both see this together. Okay, kind of, sort of. Okay, so here's my lovely DNA thingy that I did with my heritage. And as you can see, my indigenous blood is minimal. It's like 0.8%, which is hardly anything at all. I'm surprised that it registered, but it's there. So you can see that that's the region of the world that my native ancestors are from. And then over here, these are all my European ancestors. So let's see. So I got 49% Northwest European, which basically just means German. I'm 30.2% Irish Scotch Welsh, 4% Scandinavian, which was actually a lot less than I imagined, because I also have a really strong pull to that part of the world. And then the really shocking thing was that I have like 16% Eastern European, which we're talking like the Romanian, Ukrainian regions of the world, which I'm like, who the hell were those people? Like, I know nothing about them. So that might be fun to dig into. And then I'm 0.8% North American indigenous. So it's like nothing at all, but still probably more than Elizabeth Warren. Just saying, gotta get that in there. So the region of the world that my North American indigenous folk are from are that corner. It's out here, you know, the New Mexico, Utah, Arizona regions. So having Shoshone and Cheyenne ancestors makes sense for that region. And that was kind of interesting to see. Okay, it is registering a little bit in my DNA. And I'm really curious about who these Eastern European people are, because I don't know who the hell that would be. Like, I knew about my German ancestors, I knew about my Irish ancestors, I knew about my Scandinavian ancestors, but I have no idea who these Eastern European people are at all. That is a little strange to me. Oh, and I was going to show all these great, like, clips, but of who my... So if I'm going to switcheroo to, again, really quick, let's see. Can you see her? So that's Adelaide. So that's my, let's see, great-great-great-great-grandmother. So 4 greats. And then her mother was named Sally. And if you go, let me show you again. Let's see if you can see it. So, oh, there she is again. And there's this whole, like, narrative about her and her mom. Can you see it? I'm really frustrated that I can't figure out how to switch my camera. But Adelaide's story is on the Orson Pratt Brown documents. So if you go to Orson Pratt, Pratt Brown.net, there's a whole bunch of stuff about the Brown family and this whole narrative about Sally of the Shoshones and Adelaide. So Sally was born up by Fort Supply near Laramie, Wyoming. And she's buried somewhere in Gunnison. And then Adelaide, her daughter, she was born in 1838 up in Fort Laramie, Wyoming. And then she lived out a good portion of her life here in Ogden. She died in 1913 and she's buried over in the Ogden Cemetery. And I've been to her grave and it's really fucking cool. Sorry, shouldn't swear. It is cool. But in this document, it talks about how Sally was an orphan and not a ton of her history is known. What's written here is that there was a terrific battle that took place at Battle Creek, Wyoming. And most of her tribe was like totally wiped out in an episode between her people and the army. So like most of these terrible things, what I've come to understand is that when most of the buffalo got killed, then there was no food. So the native people were taking cattle because they're like, hey, well, you wiped out all of our food and we're starving. So yeah, we're going to come take some of your cattle. And this whole like idea of ownership really like they didn't get like you own the cows, like, because before that, everything just lived in the land and you took what you needed and no more than that. So they were taking cattle and a lot of the locals were complaining about it. So they sent in a battalion to just go wipe them out. And Sally was taken as a really young girl by one of the soldiers. And he took her to St. Louis. She was adopted by a merchant. It says that she lived there for several years, but she longed to be reunited with her own people. Apparently, she swam across a tributary of the Mississippi River. In my book that I wrote about her, I said the Missouri. So that was me getting things wrong. If I ever like go back and edit that, I'm going to change that to the Mississippi. And made it back to her people in Wyoming. And then she ended up marrying a trapper who was French. His name was Baptiste. And then she had 2 children, Adelaide and John, who also had the name Ishamana, which is, I think, a Shoshone like version of John. I'm not entirely sure. But when Adelaide was still pretty young, Baptiste got killed in a battle. He got shot in the back by some dude named, no, I'm wrong. So it was Sally's second husband that got shot in the back, but her first husband died from spotted fever. And she returned to Wyoming. And at this time, there were a lot of Mormons around, and a lot of the Shoshone were converting to Mormonism. And that's a whole like interesting story too, because I guess Brigham Young had actually like put out sort of like a it's okay to marry into the tribes. Like a lot of Mormon men were marrying into like the Shoshone tribe and the Utes because of their whole mythos of the Lamanites. And they were like busy trying to convert a lot of people. So anyway, Sally ended up sending Adelaide to go live with one of the wives of Brigham Young while she was still like pretty young. I think she was about 12. And so she went there and she learned how to write and do math and a number of other things like cooking and sewing and whatnot. And then she ended up going back up to live with her mom, Sally, who had married this dude named Barney Ward at that time, who was an Irishman. And then Barney got killed in an interaction with a Ute guy. Like he got shot and killed. So poor Sally, man, she just had like quite the history. And Adelaide was up near Fort Supply, and James Moorhead Brown, who was the son of Captain James Brown, had got sent up there to proselytize, so on his mission work. And it's so cool. Let me read it. Young Jim Brown, who was 19 years old, first saw Adelaide sitting on a corral, and he said she had long, beautiful legs and sparkling, beautiful eyes and dark hair. And he just fell in love with her immediately and said, that's the girl I'm going to marry. He says, well, I want to go meet her right now. That is the girl I'm going to marry. And so they got married on July 24th of 1855, which is cool. And then there's this whole story of like, they lived up there for a while And then James got hurt really bad. Like he broke his arm and his collarbone or something, like right after Adelaide had given birth to their like third child. And so she had to drive a team of horses back down to get like hospital sort of assistance for him to Ogden. So she's driving her jacked up husband with her 2 other little kids and a brand new baby from Wyoming to Ogden. I mean, she was a strong, strong woman. Pretty dang cool. Yeah. So her son Moroni was only 3 days old when they had to come down here. And so then once they got back to Ogden, and that's where James Jr.'s dad, James Sr., lived, they ended up establishing a home at 2843 Washington Boulevard. So you can drive past where they used to live. And it was just a single log room. And they lived there for a while. And then they ended up building a bigger house and used the cabin as a place where like the native people would come and stay. Because apparently James and Adelaide did a lot of work with the natives in this area to help with like not only conversion, but also like teaching them the language and like caring for the sick. And so they would stay in that cabin that was in the house behind the bigger house that they built at some point in time. So it's just really cool. And then they had a lot of children. I think they had something like 13 children. And we're descended from Nephi, who was like, I think, I got to go back into Family Search to get that. I think that he was like their 5th son. And so let's see, it went Adelaide, Nephi, then John Albert, then Francis, who is my grandma's dad, and then my grandma, Betty. So, I don't know. It's just fascinating to me. Like reading all this stuff about what those 2 women had to go through is just utterly fascinating. And I've been kind of like gently toying with the idea of maybe making either just writing a book about what I've discovered about them and just straight telling the story, or maybe almost kind of like fictionalizing it a little bit, just to kind of like get deeper into like the kind of emotions I imagine that they must have felt. I don't know a ton about Sally. There's not a ton, but there is a lot about Adelaide. And I've come across a bunch of people on Facebook when I say that I'm related to her that are also like, hey, I'm related to her too. And so there's this weird part of me that keeps wanting to write something about those 2, but also being very sensitive about it, like I don't want to be disrespectful or put too many of my own thoughts about who they were on it. But it's just such a fascinating story to me. I kind of feel like it's worth telling, when I was going to Weber State as a creative writing major, Professor Ron Dieter, who was one of my favorite, and anyone who knew Dieter, you either loved him or hated him, but he gave us this task of writing our own kind of like personal history. We read James Joyce's like Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, and then it was like our task to write something similar. And we were only supposed to write like maybe 10 to 12 pages. And that semester I wrote something like 90 pages. And that was kind of interesting because it started out as a personal narrative and then kind of morphed into something else. It kind of took on a life of its own. So I've always like thought that I would, if I ever put it out into the world, I would classify it as a fictional memoir, because some of it is like chapters straight out of my own life and other parts of it are totally made up. And I was like, I will leave that to whoever reads its imagination. But Adrian assures me that that's how most narratives are. That's how most fiction writers get their start. And in that, I kind of referenced that I knew that I had this native ancestor. And so a part of me thinks that I might write something about Sally and Adelaide before I ever put out the thing about my own life.
simply because, well, there's a handful of things. Like, there were some struggles in my life growing up, and I don't know if my family's comfortable with me sharing that. And then also, like, I'm such a different person now from who I was then to now, with a deeper understanding of reality and who my family was and what everyone was going through. And they're not those people anymore either. Like, they've grown and matured and lots of things have changed. So there's a part of me that's like, yeah, I have this vast narrative, and like I have been working on it over the years. I think I have like close to like 300 pages now. But that's where I was like, I think I'm going to market this more as like a fictional thing, because I don't think it's fair to like paint my parents under that kind of a brush. And I also, like, that's not my perspective anymore, you know? So it's so funny. Even in my own life, I have grown and changed like so much, you know? I don't know what everyone else believes, but I am part of a belief system that definitely believes in reincarnation. And most of the world's population used to. So I feel like that incarnation of who my family was, just even in this life, is like kind of over. Like, they're different people now. So I ramble about that though. But essentially what I'm getting at is that I'm sort of wondering if I should write something about these two women, because they're just so utterly fascinating to me. So maybe one of these days, when I'm not doing so much with like teaching the yoga and the qigong, I might start heavily researching these two women and write something about them. My Mormon ancestors are very fascinating as well, but I think I'm going to save that for another time, because this has already gotten quite long. Anyway, I just thought I'd share that. And if you happen to listen to this, thanks for listening. And yeah, check out your ancestors. You'll find most of them are really fascinating. Okay, that's it. Bye for now.